Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. Unfortunately, we're here to discuss a disappointing night for Celtic, a frustrating 0-0 draw against FC Kairat in the Champions League playoff round. Celtic Champions League future this season very much in the balance. They now face a long trip to Kazakhstan and have to win there somehow, over 90 minutes or potentially into extra time and penalties, Ryan, to justify their Champions League existence. There was little sign of their Champions League credentials tonight, Ryan. What's your immediate take on the match?
Just 90 minutes or nothing, John, to be perfectly honest with you. There was just nothing to write home about. I was doing my player ratings as we were going through the match. It was proving very, very difficult because I was writing the same thing about each player. Some players started okay and then their influence in the game waned as the game went on. Some players just didn't get going whatsoever. But all in all, you're writing the same script about every player. They failed to take their opportunity tonight, or the lack of opportunities. I mean, how many chances did Celtic have on goal? One, two, maybe. The Diaz Maeda chance, maybe one elsewhere in the game, but nothing to write home about whatsoever. It was just very, very disappointing. It was a strange atmosphere tonight. I thought the crowd were right up for it before the game, and then the way that Celtic played just seemed to suck the life out of the crowd completely. And you could hear the frustrations of the supporters on the pitch as the game went on, with certain chants being sung in the second half. Just a disappointing night all in all for Celtic, and they've got it all to do in Kazakhstan next week.
I said before the match I was confident about how tonight might go. Ultimately, that confidence was misplaced, unfortunately. There was no sign of this intensity or intent that Brendan Rodgers wanted to establish in the game, especially in that first half. Celtic's first half was as poor a half you'll see from Celtic all season, potentially. They improved a little bit in the second half, but only because the first half was so poor. No real major chances of note. The closest Celtic came to opening the scoring was through James Forrest, whose shot was tipped onto the post just after half-time. Diaz Maeda had a big chance near the end as well, that he had a half-hearted attempt at goal. I should say, Celtic's creativity was just lacking completely, I thought, throughout the 90 minutes. It wasn't even the final ball, Ryan. It was the moments before the final ball. It was even in the setup play, just stray passes, overhit passes, too weak passes. Just nothing was going right across the team, and there was no one really to single out to blame. It was really a team performance and a letdown across the entire team.
It was just lacking in most departments, if not all departments tonight. The front three, very disappointing. There was changes made in the second half. I thought that Yang came on and made a little bit of a difference, but nothing came to fruition for him with regard to a goal or an assist. Diaz Maeda had an off night as well with that chance he had right at the end. He took too early for whatever reason. A lot of people will talk about the front three, and there was a lot of, from where I was sitting, there was a lot of frustration in the front three and their lack of chances and their lack of opportunities. But for me, the most concerning part of the team was the midfield. The midfield just was not working whatsoever, that middle three. So much talent in there. You've got Callum McGregor, you've got Benjamin Negron, who's came in and made an impact, and you've got Vio Tati, who's performed in bigger games than this. But all three of them, it just wasn't working for the team in the midfield whatsoever. And there was changes made in the second half, but to no avail. Celtic drew nothing each with Kairat. Kairat will be delighted with that result coming away from Celtic Park for nothing each.
Yeah, Kairat's prize is knowing that they've got strength at home. Celtic now needs to make this journey. Now, after the game, Callum McGregor saying to the media that he believes Celtic can still win the tie. Obviously, Celtic will have that belief. But the fact is, for me, it's now a 50-50 tie, or at best for Celtic at this moment now. I don't think Celtic are incapable of beating Kairat, and I think next week might well be tight as well. But I think Celtic had an opportunity tonight to really lay down a mark on this tie and go for it and establish a foothold in a game of such importance for Celtic's ambitions for an entire season. It's deeply disappointing. You've mentioned the attack there. Adamida hooked at half-time. Now, I'm not wanting to get into a big Adamida debate here, so I'm just going to make this point. He's running out of time at Celtic to make an impact as a starter. People are running out of patience with him. I think the way that Brendan Rodgers handled him tonight, in terms of bringing him off at half-time, Brendan Rodgers seems to be running out of patience with him as well, I would suggest. And it's difficult for Adamida at the moment. We know he's an impact player, but he's not a Celtic starter at this point in time, or he's doing nothing to prove that he is. I don't want to get into extend that too much beyond just making that point, but it is a point coming out of tonight. When Adam Ida, your starting striker, is hooked at half-time after an abject display, yeah, you need to mention it. But he was by no means the scapegoat for tonight. It was a team performance failing. The midfield, as you say, was poor. Even the defence at times looked a bit haphazard and not quite at it, both in possession and out of possession. And listen, we're going to get on to the overall point about the board in a minute and what was going on there with some of the anti-board sentiment this evening. But Brendan Rodgers said before this match that he felt he had the squad capable of taking care of FC Kairat in this tie. He said that in his press conference, and he's not really messed about in press conferences this summer. He's always said what he feels. So the fact that performance has come from this team, Brendan Rodgers and the team have to take some responsibility for that. That is undoubted, okay? And I think that's fair enough. Now, Celtic may still well take care of FC Kairat across two legs. That remains to be seen. But there is an element of responsibility needing to be taken from the personnel on the pitch tonight. Off it, Ryan, you mentioned it earlier, but there was growing sentiment, especially in that second half. Ultimately, there were sack the board chants and various chants directed at the Celtic board and Celtic's, the powerful people at the top of Celtic. That volume is only going to increase now, it feels like, until this board start to either show a semblance of a plan or start to engage with the support in a meaningful way.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything that you've said. I do think everybody tonight takes the blame for this performance. The players on the pitch, the board off the pitch, the manager as well for failing to, failing to get the result on the night that would have put Celtic in a better position going into the second leg. I just think it's just been a night to truly forget, but at the same time it's difficult to forget a performance like this because it sticks in your mind, and people will be thinking about this performance until Saturday. You think, or you look ahead to Saturday's game and you're thinking, what sort of atmosphere is that going to be off the back of that performance? As much as there's a job at hand to play against Livingston, there's going to be that moaning and groaning if Celtic don't go and take care of business and take care of business accordingly against David Martindale's side. They've got it all to do in Kazakhstan. I'm frustrated at the performance, but I'm not overly surprised given the signings or lack of signings that Celtic have made going into this game. People are calling it a gamble going into this game without properly strengthening. Look, you get certain positions that are just, there's gaps there, and going into a game like this against a side, probably the best side that Celtic have faced this season in FC Kairat, who were organised. They aren't any great shakes, but they were organised and they did their job and they kept the clean sheet, and they were the only team that put the ball in the back of the net. Yes, he was offside. They were the only team that actually got a goal, even though it was disallowed on the night. So yeah, it's just a disappointing one. I don't want to go over old ground about talking about the board, but it's difficult not to because there's a lot of frustration in the air at the moment.
Okay, Ryan, I'm going to quickly ask you just to check you've got your right microphone connected because it sounded a bit ropey at my end. I'm going to talk through some comments on the chat while you do that. It's okay if it is. It might just be because it's busy where you are. But while you do that, I will bring in some comments. Scott Diggle challenging what I'm saying. I completely disagree with you, John. Brendan has said he needs quality and the board have done nothing. Look, I get it. Brendan Rodgers has said that. He really has. He's made the point he needed additions. And I'm not saying the board... I'm not saying, Celtic shouldn't have strengthened before tonight and this week. I've been saying that all summer. I've been saying it since February and January or whatever. Celtic should have had better options. They should have replaced Nicholas Kuhn. They should have replaced Kyogo. That is undoubted. And Brendan Rodgers has said that on multiple occasions too. I'm just making the point that I'm trying to find the balance here between fully criticising the board and then just acknowledging that was a dreadful performance from Celtic tonight, a dreadful performance on the team, that obviously some responsibility has to be taken for that from Rodgers. If Rodgers had said in his pre-match press conference, I don't have the quality of squad to take care of FC Kairat, then I wouldn't have said what I just said, but he specifically did and made that point. So they need to prove it. Next week they need to prove that they're better than this team. On paper they are. Someone was asking the question in the chat, are Kairat better than we thought, or were Celtic just poor? I think Celtic were very poor tonight. I knew Kairat weren't going to just be complete no-hopers tonight. You know, I said I was confident before the match, and I felt justified in that. Obviously, I was wrong. But I knew they were going to come here with some sort of quality. They were also going to come here with attack and intent. I said that on the briefing this morning. I said it pre-match, and some people were doubting me and telling me they were going to be parking the bus or whatever. But they did show threat in the match, I thought, and I think we have to acknowledge that. You know, Ryan, yeah, it's difficult. What did you think of FC Kairat, and with regard to next week, how are you feeling?
I thought they were well organised. Quickly before we go on, is my microphone okay? Does it sound better?
Much better, mate. It's much better.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I'm glad at least that's one positive that we can take. I've sorted the microphone out. It's been a night of technological difficulty for me, especially with that pre-match. Wish I was on the pre-match now after only having to do the post-match tonight. At least there would have been a little bit of optimism. But yeah, I thought Kairat were organised, but they didn't have to do much to keep Celtic out, to be honest with you. They weren't exactly clinging on for dear life and making last-ditch tackles in order to stop Celtic from scoring. They had very little to do. It was a comfortable night. It was about as comfortable as what they would have wanted at Celtic Park, to be honest with them. They'll be disappointed that goal was disallowed, but nothing each. It only really suits Kairat going back to Kazakhstan, and I've got no doubt that they'll carry more of an attacking threat at home in front of their own supporters. So I knew that Kairat weren't going to be exactly cannon fodder for Celtic, because they deserve to be in this position given the teams that they've put out on their road to playing against Celtic tonight. But I still thought that Celtic would have more than enough to at least score a couple of goals against this side, take that to Kazakhstan and a better go to that away game in a better frame and a better standing ahead of the second leg. But it wasn't to be, unfortunately. And you know, as much as there's anger towards the board, I think the manager and the players need to take a lot of the blame for tonight, because they just weren't good enough collectively.
Yeah, it is frustrating though, and you can understand why people are so frustrated with the inaction of this kind of this failure to see through transfer deals, because the area where Celtic are weakest, it feels like, is an attack, and tonight in a 0-0, you know, it's not often that a team comes to Celtic Park and keeps a clean sheet. And there was just an absolute lack of creativity in that team tonight. And it's in those key areas that people have been calling to be strengthened for about 8 months now. You know, or 7 or 8 months since Kyogo left, since Nicholas Kuhn left, since Jota was injured. This has not arrived on the doorstep of Celtic, you know, as some kind of, you know, hidden weakness. You know, it's not like we've been totally taken unawares by what the problems were tonight. Everyone's been talking about this every single day for about 8 months, and that's what's
why
so
you can't
galling.
be too surprised either about tonight's result. You can't be.
Yeah, and I know, as much as I was saying before the game, I expected Celtic to win tonight, I'm not particularly surprised with how it unfolded either. And I think it's fair to think both of those things. Connor saying completely unacceptable, we deserve nothing from that game. And listen, that's the thing. If Celtic had created a lot of chances tonight, we're knocking down the door, the goalkeeper has a world-class performance and all of that, then that's one thing, and you go, look, it's one of those nights, you know. But I didn't even think Celtic... There was 10 minutes of stoppage time announced, for example, and what Celtic had the Daisy Maeda shot late on, but they weren't putting Kairat under the kind of pressure that you would expect in that moment. You know, they just didn't seem to have it in them tonight, and that's what was worrying for me. They just didn't seem to have it in them to cause Kairat problems, and they were slow, they were flat. People are saying this in the chat. Yeah, it's not the best, Ryan.
It really isn't, and you know, I just don't think that the Celtic players would have needed any more motivation coming into this game, because, and I get that adverse results can happen and adverse performances sometimes, even despite being so up for the game, you go out onto the pitch and it just doesn't work for whatever reason. But there was just that lack of urgency. There was that lack of pace that we even on Friday, last Friday, we seen it from the team. We seen that pace going forward. Don't think it helped with how the game was so stop-start, particularly in the second half. Not that Celtic were doing anything to rejuvenate the support watching the game or to rejuvenate their chances in the second half, but there was a lot of stoppages that failed to allow any sort of rhythm in the game whatsoever. So by the time that 10 minutes came, yes, there was a faint cheer from the crowd, but I was almost as if I was saying to myself, it's going to be another 10 minutes of what we've seen before. I just don't see it changing in that 10 minutes, and I was proven to be correct, because nothing did change. They just played the same. There was no urgency, and that's a little bit concerning to me. There's a lot of concerning areas, but I just think the lack of urgency in a Champions League qualifier tonight. I get they've not played one in 3-4 years, but there should have been that urgency to at least put some goals on the board and make it a little bit easier for yourselves in the second leg. It's all well and good Cal McGregor coming out and saying that they can go over and win. I believe that they can go over and win in Kazakhstan, but it would have been made a lot easier if they'd done some of the business tonight. But unfortunately, they didn't.
Yeah, certainly. And listen, we've not even mentioned this, but another hammer blow coming out of tonight is the injury to Alistair Johnston. Now, we don't have the full prognosis, I doubt even Celtic do. I'm sure they're already arranging the relevant scans and everything that he's going to need to have on what appears to be a pretty serious hamstring injury.
Yep.
Now, hamstring injuries we know have varying degrees of seriousness and various, return timetables, but it wasn't good to see him go down first clutching his hamstring, visibly in pain. A fair amount of treatment on the pitch, and then ultimately stretchered off. Didn't even want to risk putting his weight on it to come off the pitch, and that's not a good sign either. So, look, I'm expecting the news on this not to be great at first glance. Again, we'll hear much more from the club on this over the next few days. Anthony Ralston looks like he will be starting in Kazakhstan next week. And yeah, I think that's just a real blow. I think it's a massive blow to this Celtic team in various respects. And if the prognosis is really bad, and again, that's speculation, but it even gets to the stage where you think about temporary solutions in the last couple of weeks of the transfer window, because if he's out for weeks or whatever it is, then Celtic will need cover in that area and competition for Anthony Ralston, I feel like.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They need a left back as well. That's the thing. They now need potentially a right back to come in and provide that competition, like you said. Just a hammer blow, especially because I think that he started the game pretty well, showed some nice touches here and there. But I think Celtic were on the attack. They were on a counter attack, but you could just see at the other end of the pitch, Alistair Johnston completely almost motionless on the ground. He was hardly moving, and there was that instant concern. The fact that he was stretchered off is a massive blow for Celtic because he's such an important player, not just defensively, but also on the attack. You saw how good that Kieran Tierney and Alistair Johnston were last week. And now you've lost one half of them, and you've got the other centre, you've got the other full-back that can only really play 65, 70 minutes before the team has to be reshuffled. It's not ideal. There's some really good things in the full-back areas in terms of personnel with Johnston and Tierney, but there's also some problems that need to be addressed both in personnel as well, and game time and getting up to full match speed in the case of Tierney.
And I think the big frustration coming out tonight for many will be that we all talk about Celtic fulfilling their potential, making sure they're in the best position possible to succeed at the level you think Celtic should be competing at. I don't think it's beyond Celtic to be competing in the league phase of the Champions League. I don't think that's over-ambitious or unrealistic. And I think what becomes most frustrating when you think of everything in that context is tonight is of Celtic's own making. I feel like the issues tonight could have been addressed by the club as a whole far better over the last few months, and they just haven't placed the team or the squad in the situation where it's the best that can be. I don't think you can say that the Celtic squad right now is the best that can be. And that's what I think is so upsetting for a lot of people. I think that's why there's a lot of emotion in the stadium, a lot of emotion for fans watching on. It's really not good enough, I don't think. And everyone everyone wants Celtic to go through next week, but no more so than the people in power at Celtic, because the volume and the intensity of what we witnessed tonight in terms of the sentiment against them is just going to increase to a massive degree if the worst happens next Tuesday evening in Kazakhstan.
Yeah, and it's completely up in the air because you're making that 1,000+ mile journey to Kazakhstan. You're going to the home. You're going to a game away from home, and you would expect Kairat to be more attacking in that game. You know, it's a one-game shootout now. No such thing as away goals anymore. It's whoever's going to be the better team on the night will go through to the Champions League. And Celtic have got to be up for that. They've got to raise their levels significantly for that away leg. Otherwise, they'll be playing Europa League football instead of Champions League football. And yeah, there is that frustration because a lot of the hurt that they're feeling just now is self-inflicted. Unfortunately, with their lack of signings, their lack of even just replacing players that have left the club. Yes, we've spoke about Nicholas Kuhn. You've also mentioned Kyogo hasn't been replaced. I think there's a genuine concern in the forward areas in terms of strikers at the moment. Not to single anybody out, but that is an area of real concern for me. And not just the players that started the game, but the players that are coming on and hardly made an impact as well. So these changes, it'll be too little, too late for the return leg because they can't register any more players. This is the squad. This is the squad that they've got to go with, and these are the players that are going to have to. No, I'm not saying that Celtic are in a hole; it's a disappointing result, but these are the players that have got to pull the club through to the Champions League. They know what they've got to do in Kazakhstan, and you're hoping that they can deliver next week. But it's going to be a tough ask.
Okay, Ryan, I think we're going to leave it there. Listen, everyone in the live chat, I see the emotion, I see the good points being made, I see some of the takes being taken, I see some of the ideas going forward. I appreciate all of it. In a live situation, it's really hard to get to them. What I want everyone to do is if you want to leave your comments in the comments below tonight, we will look at them and feature them on tomorrow's show in the morning and just do a morning after type of thing. I'll take as many comments from the live chat as I can, but the best way for us to see them and use them in tomorrow's show is if you leave them as full comments below the line once the live show's over. Tell us how you're feeling. You know, what you want to change at Celtic, what is going wrong, what's going wrong with the team, what's going on wrong with Rodgers, what's going wrong with the board, what's going wrong with everything. You know, or tell us what you're taking encouragement from. If there's anything tonight to take encouragement from, I don't think there is personally, but there might be for you. Let us know what that is so that we can feature it in the show tomorrow. That's what I'll say, because I'm seeing a lot of the emotion, I'm seeing a lot of the comments, and a lot of it is very, very valid. And I want to try and give a voice to some of that tomorrow morning, but I need your help with that, and I need you to leave comments with that. I'll put them up, I'll take screenshots, I'll get them all ready for going live tomorrow so I can pull them in far more easier. I really appreciate everyone joining us live late at night in this setting. It's never nice to discuss a disappointing Celtic result. Ultimately, Celtic haven't been defeated, and that's very, very important. This ties in the balance. Celtic are not out of the Champions League. It feels rougher right now because it's just happened, and it was as Henrik McGlaston's saying here, it was a real tough watch. You know, it's nothing sums that up more than a real tough watch. That's what it was. And hopefully we can try and figure out what went wrong. The most important people that need to figure that out are the players and the manager, because as Ryan says, no one's coming in to save Celtic in this second leg. No one's arriving from the transfer window. There's nothing. Michael Nicholson's not going to suit up and start kicking the ball in the goal. So, you know, this is it now, and we need to see this team get over the line. Ryan, thanks for joining us late at night at Celtic Park as well, hanging around the stadium for us to give us that backdrop, and we appreciate your comments. We appreciate everyone watching. Thanks for everything tonight, guys. We'll see you again tomorrow morning, and yeah, hopefully you join us again on the Celtic Way.
Cheers, guys.